In the middle of the way through Genesis, we get introduced to the characters of Jacob and Esau. Jacob is of course the one who ends up becoming Israel, not simply the nation, but also the man. Literally, his name changes to Israel. But then we have Esau, who is kind of in an odd spot, given that he is both the firstborn and yet not the one who ends up receiving the ultimate blessing from God. Already in an ancient cultural context, this flips the standard on its head, because the firstborn is typically the one who receives the blessing. Though if you've studied the Bible for any period of time, you'd know that God doesn't have a problem flipping man's order of things on its head. See, while Esau is the firstborn, he ends up rejecting God simply based on his behavior and the fact that he doesn't make wise decisions. He ends up being completely indifferent to what God has planned for him. He's indifferent to his blessing, so much so that he would be willing to sell it for food. And he's indifferent to his parents and what they tell him, as they express that they want him to marry someone who is of the same theological background as they are. And he just straight up doesn't. He goes after other women. Meanwhile, Jacob, the one seen as the trickster brother, ultimately is redeemed by God because he's willing to listen to God, and he's willing to go out and try and wrestle with God, not simply literally, which he ends up doing, but also metaphorically, in order to honor him and to work with God. Also shouldn't be lost on us that these two brothers sort of act as the symbols for the Old and New Testament. Esau, of course, being the firstborn, the one who you would expect to receive the blessing, and then Jacob being the one who comes in second, but ultimately receives the greater blessing. Much like how Israel the nation was given the opportunity to follow God, and they failed over the course of thousands of years until eventually God went out to the entire world. And of course, Israelites did jump onto that new movement, but the old covenant ended up dying because the people who were of it did not honor it the way that they were supposed to. So I think what God is saying is, regardless if you are first and last chronologically, being first or last in the kingdom of God is entirely dependent on your willingness to work with him. Multiple times it is said throughout the New Testament that God will humble those who exalt themselves and exalt those who humble themselves, and I think this is a perfect example of that. So hopefully you agree, and I'll see you tomorrow.